you talk about the rigorously tested myth, the very small amount myth, the reliable regulatory authority myth, the pesticides are essential to farming myth, all of these myths. Is there anything that you didn't share in today's presentation that you might want to share now about the book and all of those things?
Yeah, look, there's lots of things. There's our books and with chapters, and so
Love to hear.
I'd probably say there's a lot of information. I'm trying to condense it down to a talk, so I've got to be selective. But I think one of the main ones I really want to talk about is how these plasticizers, things like PFAS, the forever chemicals, and pesticides, when they work as hormone disruptors, what they do is they affect the development of the fetus. What happens when a fetus is developing? Small amounts of hormones are required at specific times. And these amounts of hormones are parts per trillion, that one drop in 3 Olympic-sized swimming pools. And that will say, it's time to develop eyes, it's time to develop limbs, it's time to develop our reproductive systems. And that small amount of hormone is required at that specific time to trigger the normal development. Now, if one of these chemicals, like a plasticizer, and forever chemicals or a pesticide in parts per trillion interferes with that development, it stops the normal development. These are actually called programming events. You get one shot at it. If that shot is missed, that child will be affected for the rest of their life. It's a really serious issue that is being ignored and should not be ignored. And so that, I suppose, is one area, I suppose one day I could give a separate talk just on that alone because it is so serious.
I remember you being on stage saying how this type of thing is sheer child abuse.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Think about it. The worst sort. Those children now are beginning a lifetime of ill health and problems. And we're seeing it now developing. What is happening to our children with their hormone systems being disrupted.
Yeah, thank you for that. We have another hand raised. It's going to be Wendy. Hi, Wendy, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much. I've been fighting this issue of pesticides for 50 years. And so I know the ignorance of the corporations and the agricultural societies. But my question is, I would like to ask you about pseudo grains, millet, the ancient grains, millet, buckwheat, which is grown in Eastern Europe, and it's a staple. Are those heavily sprayed? Are those countries, France, Germany, Czechoslovakia, Romania, are they spraying their buckwheat?
Yeah.
They still do.
Fortunately, they are. And yeah, look, it's a big issue for me. Europe likes to pretend it's best practice, but it's got some of the worst use of pesticides on the planet.
Okay.
I used to spend a lot of time in Europe when I used to be international president of IFOAM, the global umbrella body. Our headquarters are in Bonn,
I know
Germany.
IFOAM too. I know IFOAM.
Yeah. And I know Europe very, very well. And I can tell you it's no better than the US when it comes to the US and Canada.
Okay. And so I'd like to ask you this other question. I've bought organically, say for the last 40 years, and my children were raised organically, and they both have high IQs, thank goodness. And I knew that back then. I read Rachel Carson when I was a child, okay? So I was a Silent Spring. I was educated as a child. I speak to so many farmers, and they're organic farmers, and they're extremely defensive. because I haven't delved into it, it seems that the government in the United States allows a very low grade pesticide. Is that true? That they do
Okay, look,
use low grade pesticides that get the approval by the government? I've always
look,
wondered that.
yeah, look, this is one, I suppose, what happens here is that you've got a lot of misinformation put out by the conventional industry saying organics uses pesticides are low grade or they're just as toxic. And I suppose a lot of farmers, they're not scientists. They don't really know how to answer it, organic farmers, but I will. Because, I'm a farmer, but I've also got a doctorate of science.
Thank you.
And so to put it simply, and I'm also someone who has worked on the regulatory side of it, so I know these things deeply. And I'll give you an example. For instance, that copper sulfate can be used as a fungicide in organics, and you'll get people say, "Oh, copper is toxic." Well, yes, it is in very high amounts, but the fact is, we have to have copper. Without copper, we die. So small amounts of copper is actually beneficial for us, and most people are actually deficient in copper. So, and the amounts that we allow will never cause a problem. That we have good science. The other thing, I'm talking about, that's probably one thing that's residual. The majority of other pesticides, such as natural pyrethrum, which comes from the chrysanthemum flower,
Yes.
it breaks down 24 hours. So there is no residue on organic food. And another thing we might use is vegetable oils, the same vegetable oils that we eat. Salad oils. That's not going. If there's a bit of residue of a salad oil on food, it's not going to hurt people. So, what we do is we make sure that it's natural, not synthetic. It, in most cases, won't leave any residues whatsoever. Zero residues. So consumers will never get anything. And if it does leave a residue, it's actually beneficial, not harmful.
Okay. And my third question will be about the honeybees. Nobody is looking for the glyphosate in the honey. Am I correct? And how do we go? I mean, for example, I'm in California, and I see the word local raw unfiltered honey, but I'm worried that they're getting their honey where all the farms are that are full of pesticides.
Yeah.
So,
and you'll find you're exactly right, Wendy. And if you test it, you'll find not just glyphosate, but multiple pesticides in honey. And, one of the main pesticides actually causing the decline in bees, neonicotinoids, the EPA just reversed its decision to ban them as allowing them back again. These they're pesticides related to nicotine, and they're not just damaging to bees, they're damaging to everything. And they're another example, by the way, of a pesticide that becomes more dangerous when it breaks down. The older it gets, the more toxic it is.
yeah. So do we buy our honey from New Zealand, the prized Manuka honey? Do you think that is, or do we buy it from the Himalayas? I have friends that have imported from the Himalayas.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, the Himalayan one is actually very good, and also South Indian, some that are collected. There's actually the forest oil is actually wild collected, and that's really good honey. So, yeah, New Zealand, I know they have their lovely clean and green image, but I can tell you they're like Europe, pesticides everywhere. Manuka honey will have just as many pesticides as something from California.
Okay, so is there organic certification reliable from New Zealand?
Yeah, look, the organic certification in New Zealand is good. I know the people well there, and you can trust it.
Okay.
And so once again, I'd only buy organic honey where there's been a rigorous process to ensure that those bees don't go and forage on conventional farms and get all the pesticide residues in the honey.
Right. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you. And I've got a couple of more questions for you. Well, you were just talking about bees. How have the number of pollinators changed in the last 25 years, and why do you think that is?
Well, they've crashed. And not just bees, there's a whole range of other pollinators, but the word insectageddon, insect numbers have crashed around the world. And this is a real issue because there's a whole food chain of other animals, birds, lizards, reptiles, frogs, all rely on insects for food. And so they're crashing. And so what we're seeing now is just crash of ecosystems. Bird numbers in the US, for instance, are just plummeting. But same with frogs, same with reptiles. And that then has flow-on effects all through the ecology, all through the food chains. And the real reason why insects have crashed, pesticides. Indiscriminate use of pesticides in systems instead of using, and what I talk about in my book, I have a whole chapter on it. This is my latest book on how instead of killing insects, we can grow host plants to bring in the beneficial insects so we can restore the natural ecology and keep insects in balance. We don't even have to spray organic pesticides. I haven't sprayed an organic pesticide on my organic farm for 20 years. By doing this.
That leads to my last question, and I feel like a child asking it, but why have we grown so comfortable spraying pesticides on our crops and on our lawns? Like what has come over all of us? What's going on? What are we doing?
Yeah, look, Stephen, I wish I could answer that. If I knew the answer to that, we'd know how to reverse it. And it's something I struggle with. That's why I've written 2 books on pesticides. The first one I wanted to call The Myths of Safe Pesticides, because people spray it because they believe it's safe. And we have to deconstruct these myths. But, the big trouble is we just don't have mass media. And I just wish we could get the same amount of exposure as these $1 trillion pesticide cartels have, so we could get our messages out there to tell people, what I love about you is the real truth about health. If only today we're speaking to millions and not hundreds. That's what we need to do to win this battle.